I thought I had my wife figured out. 15 years married, a wonderful little girl, and a thriving company I built with my closest friend. Then, at 6 in the morning, she came dragging herself through our front door, and in a single sunrise, everything I believed about my life blew apart. What I uncovered after that made me doubt it all. My name is Bradley Cartwright, but everyone knows me as Brad. I'm 44, and I've spent the last 15 years building an asphalt paving outfit from the ground up into something people actually respect. We do it all: driveways, small roads, parking lots, and the quality of our work usually speaks before I have to. Hard labor, honest sweat, and a promise kept. That's how I was raised, and that's how I run things. I met Valerie when I was 31 and she was 26. She was a receptionist at a medical clinic. Bright smile, easy charm. 2 years later we got married, and for a long stretch I believed we were rock solid. We tried for a family for years, sat through appointment after appointment, paid for treatments that drain your savings and test your patience. When Emily finally arrived 3 years ago, I thought we'd push through the storm. I was wrong. My partner, Dexter Holmes, has been both my best friend and my right hand since childhood. We grew up on the same streets, went to the same schools, and when I launched the paving business, Dex stood beside me from day one. He keeps the machines running and manages the scheduling. I handle clients and the paving itself. We've weathered everything together: lean seasons, good ones, family crises, name it. I trusted him with the company and with my confidence, and apparently that was mistake number one. The cracks started showing about 6 months back. Valerie began going out more, always with her girlfriends, always to bars and clubs. At first, I let it go. After Emily was born, I was tied up at home a lot, and I figured she deserved some breathing room. But the outings multiplied, the returns got later, and she'd come in reeking of booze and stale smoke. "I need this, Brad," she'd tell me when I pushed back. "I'm cooped up with a toddler all day while you're at work. Can't a woman have some fun?" The thing is, I wasn't working for sport. I was grinding to provide for us, to make sure Emily wanted for nothing, and so we could finally buy the house with the big backyard Valerie always dreamed about. Every 12-hour shift I put in was for them. Yet somehow I turned into the bad guy for worrying when my wife stumbled home at 3 a.m. Last Friday was supposed to be different. I wrapped a big commercial job ahead of schedule and got home early, hoping to spend the evening with Val and Emily. Instead, there was a note on the counter: "Out with the girls. Emily's staying at your mom's. Don't wait up." I called her, voicemail. Tried again an hour later, still voicemail. By midnight, I was prowling the living room like a caged animal. That's when it clicked that something was seriously off. This wasn't just a night with friends anymore. It felt like a lockout, that she was shutting me out on purpose. When I finally heard a car roll into the driveway at dawn, I knew my world was about to tilt. At 6:15 a.m., a car door slammed outside, slicing through the quiet like a gunshot. I'd been in the recliner for an hour, staring through the window, my coffee gone cold. Every scenario I'd spun all night was about to face reality. The front handle rattled. Forever, it seemed. Then keys clinked to the porch with a metallic clatter and a muffled curse from Valerie. Then came a sound I'll never forget: the slow drag of the door opening, followed by the most pitiful scene I've ever witnessed. My wife, the mother of my child, crossed our threshold on her hands and knees. Her black dress was bunched up around her waist. Her hair looked tornado-tossed. One high heel was missing entirely. The smell reached me before her eyes did. Alcohol, cigarettes, and something else that turned my stomach. Cheap cologne that wasn't mine. "Brad," she slurred, blinking hard to focus on me across the room. "When did you get home, baby?" I rose, fists clenched at my sides. Seeing her like this, wrecked, pathetic, stinking of another man, sent a wave of disgust and fury through me I'd never felt before. "I've been here all night, Valerie," I said, keeping my voice even while a hurricane built inside me. "The question is, where the hell have you been?" She tried to stand, slid back against the frame, and let out a laugh that sounded more like a whimper. The missing shoe told the story. Too drunk to keep her balance, too far gone to even stand with dignity. "Just out with the girls," she muttered, patting at her hair. "You know, dancing and stuff." Dancing and stuff. Right. That's why there were hickeys on her neck, visible from across the room. "Where's your other shoe, Val?" I asked, stepping in. She glanced at her feet like she'd only just noticed them. "I don't know. Must have lost it somewhere. That casual shrug, no shame, no explanation, said it all. This wasn't a simple night of drinks with friends. It was worse, something that was about to blow my life wide open. Get up, I told her, my voice turning hard. We need to talk. And as she hauled herself up the wall for support, I already knew whatever came out of her mouth next would be lies. The truth was splashed across her wrecked look, and it said one thing: my marriage was already done. I lifted Valerie to her feet and steered her to the kitchen table, more because it had to be done than out of kindness. She crumpled into the chair like a rag doll, still carrying the stink of another man. My hands trembled as I poured a fresh cup of coffee, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. So, I said, sitting across from her and forcing my voice to stay even, tell me about your girls' night. Valerie pressed her fingers to her temples and squinted at me like I'd switched languages. What do you want to know, Brad? We hit that new club downtown, had some drinks, danced a bit. Just normal stuff. Normal stuff, I echoed, watching her closely. Is it normal to come home missing a shoe? Normal to reek of cheap men's cologne? Her gaze slid off mine. I don't know what you're talking about. I leaned in. Val, I might spend my days laying asphalt, but I'm not an idiot. That isn't your perfume. And those marks on your neck sure didn't come from dancing. She reflexively covered her throat with her hand. Confirmation enough. You're being paranoid, Brad. I was just having fun. With who? I pushed. With the girls. Sarah, Michelle, you know them. I pulled out my phone and tapped Sarah's number. Valerie's eyes went huge. Brad, what are you doing? She hissed. Sarah picked up on the third ring, voice thick with sleep. Hello. Sarah, it's Brad Cartwright. Sorry to wake you, but I need to ask. Were you out with Valerie last night? A beat of silence. Brad, I was home with the kids all night. I haven't seen Val in weeks. I ended the call and stared at my wife. The color drained from her face. Want to try again? I asked, deadly calm. Valerie's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. For the first time since she'd crawled through the door, she actually looked afraid. I can explain, she whispered. I'm listening. Even as I said it, I knew whatever came next would be another lie. The truth was sitting right there in front of me, on her guilty face and in that ruined appearance. My wife had been with another man, and now she was going to try to talk her way out of it. The only question left was how long it had been going on. I was with Dexter, Valerie finally breathed, barely audible. The cup slipped from my hand, shattered on the tile, hot coffee and shards flying, none of it really registering. My brain fought to process the words. What did you just say? I asked, so quietly it was almost soundless. Valerie looked up, tears streaking down. Brad, I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to happen. Dexter, my business partner, my best friend since we were kids, the man who stood beside me at my wedding, the one I trusted with my livelihood, my secrets, my family. I shot to my feet. The chair clattered backward behind me. How long? Brad, please. How long, Valerie? She flinched at the edge in my voice. A few months. Maybe longer. I don't know exactly when it started. A few months. While I was grinding 12-hour days to keep us afloat, my wife and my best friend were sneaking around. Every time Dex came by for dinner. Every time we hashed out schedules over beers. Every time he tossed a ball with Emily in the backyard. He was lying straight to my face. Where? I asked, surprised at how flat and controlled I sounded. What? Where did you meet him? Hotels. His place. Her silence said the rest. Then she added something that froze my blood. Sometimes here, she murmured. When you were out on jobs. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. In my house. In my bed. While my 3-year-old was probably playing in the next room. Was Emily here? I asked, the realization slamming into me. Valerie nodded miserably. She was usually napping or watching cartoons. She doesn't know anything, Brad. We were careful. Careful. They'd been careful, while they were setting fire to my life and risking scarring my daughter. I gripped the counter so hard my knuckles blanched. The rage building inside me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. This wasn't just cheating. It was the total betrayal of everything I believed in, everything I'd worked for. Get out, I said quietly. Brad, get out of my house, I repeated, turning to face her. Pack your things and go. Now. Valerie stood, unsteady. Where am I supposed to go? I looked at her with pure disgust. Call Dexter. I'm sure he'll look after you. While she lurched toward the stairs, I scrolled to Dex's name. Time to speak to my former best friend. 20 minutes later, I was on my mother's front steps, hands still shaking with fury. I needed to pick up Emily, but I also needed someone who would actually understand what this felt like. Mom had always been my anchor, the one person who told me the truth straight. She opened the door before I could knock. She must have heard my truck. "What's wrong?" she asked, taking one look at me. "Is Emily awake?" "She's still sleeping, honey. Come in. You look awful." I followed her into the kitchen, the same room where she fed me breakfast before school, patched up skinned knees, and mended busted hearts. But this heartbreak was different. It felt permanent. "Mom," I said, lowering myself into the chair at her kitchen table. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely straight with me." She poured a mug of coffee and took the seat opposite. "Of course, son. Did you know about Valerie and Dexter?" The cup stalled halfway to her lips. The look that moved over her face, guilt, sadness, resignation, told me everything before a word came out. "Oh, Bradley," she whispered. The betrayal landed like another punch to the ribs. "You knew?" "I suspected," she said carefully. "I saw them together at the grocery store a few weeks back. They were standing too close. Too familiar. But I wasn't sure, and I didn't want to say anything unless I knew." "A few weeks ago," I said, pushing to my feet and pacing to the window. "Mom, they've been sleeping together for months." "Months?" "Bradley, watch your language," she said on reflex, then sighed. "I'm sorry. I should have spoken up. I should have warned you." I turned to face her. "Why didn't you?" She dropped her gaze to her hands. "Because I hoped I was wrong. Because I didn't want to be the one to blow up your marriage. Because," she paused, "because your father made me promise not to meddle in your relationships after what happened with that girl in high school." That girl from high school, Lisa Patterson. Mom had warned me back then. Said Lisa was trouble. I blew up at her, accused her of trying to run my life. 6 months later, Lisa cheated, and Mom was there holding me together. But she never said, "I told you so." "This is different," I said. "I know," she answered. "And I failed you by keeping quiet." Tears were sliding down her cheeks now. "I'm so sorry, honey." I sat again and took her hand. Even through the anger, she was still my mother. "It isn't your fault, Mom. But you need to know, Valerie's leaving. The marriage is done." She nodded. "What about Emily?" "Emily stays with me. Valerie can see her, but my daughter isn't going to be raised by someone who thinks cheating is acceptable." Mom squeezed my fingers. "What can I do? Be there for Emily when I can't. This is going to get ugly before it gets better." Right on cue, my phone buzzed. "Dexter. We need to talk." I angled the screen toward my mother. She read it and shook her head. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I stood and headed for the door. "Give him exactly what he's earned." I drove to Dexter's apartment with my jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. Every red light stretched forever. Every mile felt like punishment. By the time I rolled into the lot, the fury in me had cooled into something hard and precise. He was waiting on the second-floor balcony, still in yesterday's clothes. The sight of him, rumpled, guilty, pathetic, made my hands itch to close around his throat. "Brad," he called as I stepped from the truck. "Come up. We need to talk." I took the stairs 2 at a time, my work boots banging on the metal treads like gunshots. When I hit his landing, he already had the door open, easing backward as if he expected me to swing. "Smart man. How long have you been practicing this little speech, Dex?" I asked, stepping into the living room. "How many times have you rehearsed what you're about to say?" He shut the door and raked his hands through his hair. "Brad, I know you're pissed." "Pissed?" I barked, a laugh with no humor in it. "Pissed is what I get when somebody cuts me off in traffic. Whatever I am right now doesn't have a name." He backed up until his shoulders met the wall. "I never meant for it to happen." "Bull," I said, closing the distance. "You don't accidentally sleep with your best friend's wife for months. You don't accidentally burn down a marriage. You chose this. You wanted it." "It wasn't like that," he said, desperate. "Valerie was lonely. You were always working. She needed someone to talk to." I fisted his shirt and slammed him against the wall. "Don't you dare try to make this my fault." His eyes went wide with fear. "Brad, please. You want to know what happens next?" I said, my face inches from his. "You're going to sell me your half of the business for exactly $1. You'll sign today, and then you'll disappear from my life for good." "I can't," he whispered. "That company is all I've got. Should have thought of that before you decided to sleep with my wife." I let him go and stepped back. You've got 24 hours to get the papers drawn up. If you don't, I'll make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of man you are." He smoothed his shirt with shaking hands. "What about Valerie? What about her? Are you going to divorce her?" I stared at him with pure disgust. "That's between me and my wife, or rather, my ex-wife." I turned for the door. "Brad, I'm sorry," he called after me. "I really am." I paused without looking back. "No, you're not. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference." I left him standing in that apartment, looking like the broken man he'd always been beneath the friendly smile. 20 years of friendship, gone in a single morning. But as I walked back to the truck, something else hit me. I felt lighter than I had in months. The dead weight was finally off my shoulders. When I got home, Valerie sat at the kitchen table with a suitcase by her side, eyes swollen and red like she'd been crying for hours. Her hair was still a wreck, and she'd changed into jeans and a beat-up sweater. For a heartbeat, she almost looked like the woman I'd married all those years ago. Almost. "Brad," she said as I came in, "we need to talk." "No, we don't," I answered, brushing past her to fill a mug. "You need to leave." "Please," she stood. "Give me 5 minutes to explain." I turned and faced her. "Explain what, Val? That you've been lying to me for months? That you brought another man into our bed while our daughter was down the hall? What exactly do you think you can say that makes this okay?" She sank back into the chair. "There's something else you need to know." Something in her voice made me pause. "What?" "This isn't the first time," she whispered. The cup slipped from my hand and hit the floor. This time, I didn't even flinch. "What did you just say?" "There was someone else 2 years ago, before Emily was born." I stared at her like she was a stranger. "Who?" "A guy from the gym. It only lasted a few weeks. I ended it when I found out I was pregnant." "When you found out you were pregnant." The words came slow as the meaning landed. "Val, are you telling me?" "Emily is yours," she rushed out. "I worked out the dates. She's definitely yours." My legs went weak. I dropped into the chair across from her. "You worked out the dates." She nodded, miserable. I was terrified when I realized what I'd done. But when the doctor gave me the due date, I knew she had to be yours. "Had to be," I repeated. "Val, listen to yourself. You're talking about our child like some lab calculation." "I know it sounds bad. It sounds insane." I slapped the table. "You've been lying to me for years. Our whole marriage sits on lies." "Not everything was a lie," she pleaded. "I do love you, Brad. I love our family." I laughed, empty and bitter. "You love our family? You've been sleeping with other men for years. You brought Dexter into our house, into our bed, while our daughter slept down the hall. That's your version of love?" She broke again, sobbing. "I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" I paced to the window. "Cheating on your husband isn't a mistake, it's a choice. And you've made that choice over and over for years." "What about counseling?" she asked, desperate. "We could try to fix this." I turned back. "Fix what? That you're a liar? That I can't trust a single thing you say? That every time I travel, I'll wonder who you're in bed with?" She had no answer. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, voice steady. "You're taking that suitcase and leaving. You can see Emily on weekends, supervised, until we sort custody. And you're going to sign whatever my lawyer puts in front of you." "Brad, please. This conversation is over, Valerie. Our marriage is over. Get out of my house." She picked up the suitcase with shaking hands and walked to the door. At the threshold, she turned. "I really did love you," she said. "No," I said. "You loved the security I provided. You loved having a husband who worked hard and didn't ask questions. You never loved me." After she left, I sat alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of my life, and realized something. For the first time in months, the house felt peaceful. Later that afternoon, I was clearing out Valerie's dresser when I found it. A shoebox tucked behind her winter coats at the back of the closet. Inside were letters, cards, and photos that told the story of a woman I'd never truly known. The first letter was 3 years old, signed by someone named David. Explicit, romantic, full of hotel rendezvous and lies to the husband. My hands shook as I read. Understanding her betrayal stretched even further than she'd admitted. More letters from David followed, over several months. Then those stopped, and new ones began, from someone named Jake. Then another, Tony. And finally, the most recent were from Dexter, some dated only weeks ago. She hadn't cheated twice. She'd been cheating for the duration. The photographs were worse. Shots of her with different men at restaurants, hotels, places I couldn't place. In some, she wore jewelry I'd never seen, gifts, apparently. At the bottom of the box lay the worst find, a pregnancy test and a doctor's appointment card from 4 years ago. Not our fertility specialist, a different office. The appointment looked like it was for genetic testing. My phone rang, snapping me out of it. My lawyer, Mike Patterson. Brad, he said, I've got some information. I ran that background check on Valerie like you asked. What did you find? She's got credit cards you don't know about, 3 of them, all maxed. Charges at hotels, restaurants, shopping. You're looking at around 30 grand in debt. I closed my eyes. Anything else? Yeah. She's been in touch with a divorce attorney for the last 2 months. Filed preliminary paperwork, never finalized. Looks like she was preparing to leave. She was going to walk out, I muttered. Looks that way. Here's the twist. She withdrew the paperwork last month, right about when she might have realized you were onto her. I ended the call and looked at the evidence strewn across the bedroom floor. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd been setting me up to break me financially and emotionally, then pulled back when she sensed I was catching on. The woman I thought I'd married had never existed. She'd been performing for years, and I'd been too trusting, too buried in work, too naive to see it. But I wasn't naive anymore. I gathered everything, boxed it, and called my attorney back. Mike, I said when he answered, I need you to come over. I've got something that's going to change everything. As I waited for him to arrive, I made myself a promise. Valerie might have taken me for a fool for years, but that version of Brad Cartwright was gone. The man her betrayal forged was going to make sure she faced the consequences. 6 months later, I sat in my attorney's office, signing the final divorce papers. The case we'd built was crushing, not only the affairs, but the financial deceit, the hidden credit lines, the planned exit. Valerie tried to fight at first, but when confronted with years of documented treachery, even her lawyer pushed her to settle. The judge awarded you full custody of Emily, Mike Patterson said, sliding the stack across his desk. Valerie gets supervised visitation every other weekend, and she's on the hook for child support. Child support? I asked. How's she going to manage that? That's her problem now. The court doesn't care that she blew out cards on her flings. He leaned back. What about Dexter? He signed over his half of the company for exactly what you demanded, $1. Once the town heard what he'd done, he couldn't afford a fight. I scrawled my name on the last page. He's lost most of his buddies. Can't find steady work in the county. Last I heard, he's headed to Florida. And the paternity test. Emily's mine, I said. I'd never truly doubted it, but I needed certainty. I stood and shook Mike's hand. Thanks for everything. You did the right thing, Brad. Some men would have tried to patch it up. Some men don't respect themselves. I drove home to find Emily in the backyard with my mother, who'd been helping while I rebuilt my life. At 3, my little girl was too young to grasp why Mommy didn't live with us, but she was bright-eyed and steady. Daddy, she squealed, sprinting over with dirt-smudged hands and a huge smile. Hey, princess, I said, scooping her up. What you two been up to? Planting flowers with Grandma. I looked to my mom, pride shining on her face. Thank you, I mouthed. That evening, after Emily was asleep, I sat on the back porch with a beer and took stock of what I'd rebuilt from the wreckage. The paving business was thriving. Word got around about the way I handled things, and somehow that translated into more clients. People who respected a man who stood his ground. My phone buzzed. Sarah Miller, the teacher at Emily's daycare who'd been asking me out for a month. I'd finally said yes. We had a date set for Saturday night. I wasn't ready for anything heavy, but for the first time in years I trusted my judgment again. The doormat Valerie tried to mold, the guy who worked himself raw and never asked questions, wasn't coming back. In his place stood a man who understood his worth and wouldn't accept less. 2 years after the divorce was finalized, I stood in my yard watching Emily pump her legs on the swing set I built for her 5th birthday. She laughed and begged me to push her higher, blonde hair flying. Higher, Daddy, hold on tight. I called, giving her another shove. Sarah Miller, now Sarah Cartwright, my wife of 6 months, stepped outside with 2 glasses of lemonade. She'd moved in slowly over the past year, and Emily had embraced her from the start. Sarah never tried to replace Valerie. She simply became the steady, loving presence my daughter needed. How are my 2 favorite people? She asked, handing me a glass. Perfect, I said, kissing her forehead. Watch me, Sarah. Emily yelled from the swing. I watched my wife beam at my daughter with real affection and felt that familiar gratitude settle in. This was a real marriage. Two people who respect each other, back each other, and put family first. Valerie still had supervised visits every other weekend, though she'd missed more than half this past year. She'd moved 3 hours away with yet another boyfriend, number 4 or 5 since the divorce. I'd lost track. Emily asked about her sometimes, but the tears stopped when Valerie didn't show. The company had grown to 3 full-time employees, and I was weighing a second location. The scandal with Valerie and Dexter had faded into background noise, but the respect I earned never did. Last month, I ran into Dexter at a gas station while traveling for work. He looked wrecked, older, worn, alone. He tried to approach, maybe to apologize, maybe to beg, but I turned and walked away. Some bridges are better left burned. Daddy, Emily called, snapping me back. Can you push Sarah too? I don't think the swing can hold both of us, Sarah laughed. We can try, I said, wrapping my arms around my wife and settling her onto the swing beside Emily. As I pushed them both, their laughter mingled in the evening air, and something settled in my chest. Valerie's betrayal had been the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to become the man I was meant to be and to build the life I truly deserved. The pain was gone, replaced by a deeper gratitude for real love, honest talk, and the peace that comes from knowing you're exactly where you belong. Some stories end in revenge. This one ends in redemption.